Hey everyone, Cell here with my initial thoughts, first impression of the new league and mechanic, and the labyrinth changes, and some tips for you if you are struggling a bit or haven't gotten into the league yet and want to know what it's all about. So let's get into it. So at the beginning of every zone, you'll find an entrance into the Wildwood, and you'll go in and generally see some wispy things right at the start here. We'll roll that back a little. This is some footage from me leveling. So right at the start, you can see a little bit of this going on over here. Looks like there's some blue ones and some yellow ones, but mostly yellow. So you could follow those, and those will lead you on a trail to pick up wisps. These wisps serve two different purposes. They are the currency you'll be using if you find an NPC to trade with, and they are the juice, so to speak, that will be applied to all of the enemies in the area when you leave the Wildwood. Now, as far as I know, the amount of enemies that have the empowerment applied to them is determined by the number of wisps you have when you leave, not by the number of wisps you have or pick up in total. So what that means is if you buy something from the NPCs, less enemies will get empowered than if you didn't buy anything from them. So that's something to keep in mind, possibly keep an eye on. Again, I don't know for a fact that that's the case, but I believe that's the case. Now, there are some complaints about visibility issues, especially as it pertains to color blindness. It's hard for me to even tell that there are blue wisps over there, even though I'm pretty sure there are. It looks like mostly yellow, though, to me. So that might be a bit of a struggle. You might be able to tell based on how they look down here. Maybe you can get a better feel for how they look and just keep an eye on the number as it goes up as you're going in whichever direction. But it is very unfortunate, and hopefully they have a fix coming for that. So as we go in here, I start heading that way. Start following these yellow wisps. You will find some enemies. A bunch of people are saying, well, I don't want to play this as a bow build because it's going to be bad. Like, there are going to be enemies in there and they're going to one-shot you. It's not that bad. I'm playing a full glass cannon. Now that I'm in the maps, it's not really particularly difficult. Mostly I'm dying to things like chaos damage, rather, because my res is negative 60. But especially if you aren't playing a build that has a lot of screen clutter, like this one, you will be able to see more of the telegraphed attacks, especially from some of the bigger, kind of like mini-boss type enemies. So we can see here, if we scroll back a little bit more, as I entered this area, we can see a pulsing tuber over here. And essentially there are a few delve-like nodes that exist within the Wildwood. And so they'll have enemies here as you uncover the darkness. And there will be these loot crate type things. If you find one with spiders in it, those ones are pretty good. I found one super early into the campaign, got quite a few good early currencies out of it. So keep an eye out for things like that. Interactables. There's one with people impaled on spikes as well. So that's another one. A lot of these are accompanied by enemies, of course, so watch out for those. And they can be pretty tough. There's one with a big altar in the middle that's pretty tough. You don't necessarily have to fight anything. I could go around and loot stuff if I wanted to, but most likely I'm going to die if I try to loot stuff without killing stuff first. So, typical PoE balancing type stuff. And I will say, I did mention that I'm having a decent time now that I'm in maps. It is pretty tough in the campaign. And my suggestion would be, as you go through the campaign, probably in its current state, skip the league mechanic in Act 1, because there isn't a ton of benefit to running it in Act 1. you can't encounter the NPCs in Act 1, which means you can't get your ascendancies yet. So I would personally wait until Act 2. You can encounter the NPCs right away in Act 2. I found my first one in the first Wildwood I ran in Act 2. I found my second one in the second area. And the third one took me a few more zones to find, but it wasn't excessively long. And simply talking to them will get you your first 2 Wildwood Ascendancy points. So in my case, I ultimately landed on going with the Warden for the movement speed bonus for having no socketed gems in your boots. That's the only one I decided to take advantage of. There are also benefits for the same for helm, gloves, and body armor, but those weren't as relevant to me, so I decided to skip out on those. And it is free to switch between the various ascendancies. So as soon as you get one, even if it's not the one you like, I would pick it. Then when you find the one you do like, it is completely free to switch even if you have points allocated. If you want to respec points within the ascendancy itself, so like I eventually took points out of the socketed gems bonus and put them into tinctures, that costs 1 regret orb each, which is pretty reasonable, all things considered. Now here at the end, once you run out of ability to uncover more darkness and find more wisps and such, a portal will open back to the entrance, and that's how you tell you're done. I don't know if there's a way to leave early. If there's not, I kind of wish there was, because sometimes I do feel like leaving early because I'm not seeing anything interesting or I found what I was looking for, namely the NPCs. And you'll see down in the bottom right, I have 1,551 vivid wisps, and those give quantity. Wild, the purple ones, give rarity, and the blue ones give a chance for enemies to drop currency. Now, it is pretty hard to tell which enemies in the overworld area are actually empowered. They do have a note under their regular mods that say like Vivid Empowerment or Wild Empowerment, but it is pretty difficult to tell, in my opinion, whether or not they are unless you're hovering directly over them, especially as you get more visual effects going on later in the game. Now, the benefit to the empowerment does not seem that noticeable at the moment, and this is a common point of feedback among the player base right now, that you can't necessarily feel great impact from the empowerment in terms of the rewards, but it definitely makes things significantly more difficult. So, for example, right here, because I didn't know what to look out for, was not yet used to the mechanic because I'm in Act 2, I accidentally Vivid Empowered Oak. And I didn't realize that for about 30 minutes. So I literally thought something was horrendously wrong with my build. I double checked everything. I'm like, did I do something to reduce my damage by like 90%? No, it was all fine. So I'm like, am I just horrible at this? He was literally impossible for me to kill because he gets more damage, more speed, and either more health or reduced damage taken. The effect is the same in that I would get him down to about 90% health at best, and he would Enduring Cry and heal himself back up to full. Now, other bosses don't necessarily recover health, so you might be able to take them down eventually. For example, Ziggy D fought a empowered Brutus in Act 1 that took him 30-something deaths over the course of 10 minutes, when normally that fight's going to take you like a minute or two. So keep an eye out for that. My suggestion would be to not run the Wildwood in zones where you know you're going to be fighting a zone boss, and especially not like an act boss, because the empowerment will make it ridiculous. If you do accidentally and you see that the boss is empowered, in its current state, in all honesty, the best thing to do is probably going to be to reset the zone and make sure not to run the Wildwood. So that would be my suggestion at the moment. I would recommend getting your first 2 points in Act 2, finding the NPCs, getting used to the mechanic. And then if you don't particularly feel like running the mechanic until maps, that's perfectly fine. I did a bit of a mix. I ran a few zones here and there. Again, avoiding ones where I was fighting zone bosses or act bosses. And I got some decent stuff out of it, but for the most part, it just took time. I didn't really find many of the NPCs early on. I'm seeing them a lot more frequently in maps. So I don't know if that's because I'm just more used to the mechanic, or if the actual rate that you see them goes up, or if you can uncover more area, and therefore you're more likely to see them. Could be a mix of that, but on top of that, you're also going to be seeing higher level bases. If you're after tinctures, like everything else, there are mods on it that require certain levels to be certain tiers. So by doing that at higher level, you'll see higher tier tinctures, effectively, that have better mods on them. Something to note, like I said earlier, the wisps you find in the area are the currency with which you buy things from the NPCs. That does not transfer between zones. So if you're stumbling through the Wildwood and you find the warden who wants the yellow wisps, but you've only been picking up blue so far, you won't be able to buy anything from them. You'll have to go out and find some yellow with whatever remaining time you have there, and then you may or may not have enough, and their inventory is going to change every time. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of this. It is what it is. I haven't run into any major problems so far, but I'm sure it's going to feel really bad when you come across an NPC and you just don't have the wisps required to buy an item, but you find a really good item that you want to buy. That's going to feel really painful, I think. I don't know if it'll happen that often, but we'll have to see. Just something to keep an eye on, and remember that the wisps don't carry between zones as a currency for the NPCs. You get your first 2 points by talking to the NPCs, and the remainder by doing quests for them. You can be given multiple quests in a row. So between acts probably 6 and 10, I didn't really do the Wildwood at all. I just wanted to finish up pushing through the campaign. And I ended up getting both quests the next time I found the NPC in maps. So there's no need to necessarily go through the Wildwood in the campaign just because you're worried about missing out on a quest, or like thinking you have to do one before you get the other. I talked to her, I got both quests at once, and I was able to complete them both relatively quickly following that point. So something to keep in mind as well if you're that type of player. Otherwise, again, perfectly fine to just go through and do the Wildwood as much as you want in the campaign. So those are my initial impressions of the Wildwood. Lab video's going kind of long for me, so I will keep my thoughts on those pretty short. I think the lab changes are generally pretty good. I'm seeing some data come in on places like Reddit. A few people running various tests in standard. The craft for exceptional gems from the Eternal Labyrinth, which is the tier 4 labyrinth, seems pretty rare as expected. Everything else seems pretty common though, even the one that says directly get a transfigured version of the gem. So keep that in mind. If you are running Labyrinth, make sure to have a gem that you want a transfigured version of, either to use for yourself or sell. And yeah, I don't know. I'm liking it so far. It looks like some people are having fun with transfigured gems. I did actually get one of the ones I wanted from my first lab, like normal Labyrinth, which was Bladefall of Impaling, so definitely expect something related to that coming out at some point in the future after I get myself established with this character. Anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you're having a good time in the league, and I'll see you next time. Peace.